Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Nickle LaMoreaux School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Nickle LaMoreaux, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at IBM, meaning that she leads IBM's people strategy, skills, and employee experiences and services, and global HR team, supporting more than 250,000 IBMers across 170 countries.
Nickle, it is always a great treat to have you here in town, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, HR is clearly helping drive innovation at IBM. What are some of the places that you can point to that really makes a big difference?
So look, I think that innovation is the responsibility of every HR department. And I know sometimes we say, well, isn't that the technical team's responsibility? But I think there is no place better in HR, and I think you can do it throughout the entire employee life cycle. I always tell HR teams to think about it in a couple different ways. Where can you infuse innovation for efficiency? Where can you infuse it for effectiveness? And where can you infuse it for employee experience? So I think those are three ways that as HR departments are thinking about where can we and should we drive innovation, it shouldn't be innovation for the sake of innovation. It really should be across those three areas.
So it seems unusual to me to hear that HR should be the place, kind of the seat of driving innovation. So how does this happen?
So at IBM, we call ourselves Client Zero. And so we have the ability to take software, technology products that are being developed in our business units and try them out for ourselves first in HR. We've done this with some of the automation tools that are existing in payroll and recruiting, but we're also experimenting quite a bit with AI, and I know you and I are going to talk about that a little bit later. But it gives us the opportunity to really try out these tools. But even if you're an HR department that doesn't have technology or development like we do, I think there are three things that are hitting all HR departments that require innovation. The first is we're all under cost pressures. We're all being asked to do more with less. The second thing that's happening is there's increasing compliance environment. It's getting more and more complex, and the stakes are really high. So you have to do everything right the first time. And then employee expectations around experiments, around what it feels like to work, are really important. So these three things are happening to HR departments. You got to be compliant, you got to do it as effectively, cost effectively as possible, and your employees want you to do it in these amazing digital ways. Those three things don't all come together unless you've got technology and innovation driving them.
So if you keep pushing out these new ideas and new innovation, how do you make sure that the employees are not feeling kind of whipped around? So you described them, you didn't say guinea pigs, but it's kind of what I heard, as an opportunity for you to really try out these new things, which both makes you far advanced from many organizations in the HR space. But how do you make sure that experience is still a really good one for your employees around the world?
We have two kind of concepts that we always talk about. The first one is co-create. So we don't just put experiments out there that HR has created in a little vacuum. We actually co-create with our employees, with managers. What are their pain points? What should we try? So it's really the experiments are ones that they're willing participants in. But the second thing we talk about is minimal viable product. We talk about the fact that this is going to get better over time and come with us on the journey. So you're right. The first thing we put out, it may only do one thing really well, and there may be lots of things wrong with it. But the employees and the managers that are co-creating this with us know that this is a journey to go from step one to step two to hopefully something that's amazing.
So that seems like that must require both a lot of communication from HR and a lot of trust that the whole organization has in the HR leadership. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so I think from an HR perspective, how do you gain that trust? So one, you have to be domain experts. You really have to show that whatever experience that you're transforming through technology, that you have deep expertise in. And so think that's a first piece of it. A second piece is you have to be willing to take others' ideas. So in this co-creation process, we are building trust by inviting people in, suggesting that, oh, that is a good idea. It didn't come from HR, it came from finance, or it came from this first line manager group. Okay, we're gonna take that and build that in. But the third thing, and this is really critical, you also gain trust when you're willing to kill an experiment. So you've tried something, it doesn't work. Are you willing to take it away? And I think we've done a good job in HR of all three of those steps, that when something doesn't work, you pivot, but that we're bringing people along on the journey with us.
All right. So that last one is also really interesting to me.
Yeah.
How do you know when it didn't work? Because I presume many people are like myself, so no matter what change happens, I'm going to be complaining about it. So how do you separate just the natural not wanting change versus, okay, this really isn't working?
So there's a couple things that we do. We do set out the objectives and the measures at the very beginning. So we're about to launch an experiment, a minimal viable product. Let's talk about what are some of the metrics that we're going to use. It might be usage. It might be NPS. We use NPS quite extensively in HR for our offerings, our tools, our processes.
Can you just say what NPS is?
Yes, Net Promoter Score. So think about this as, are you satisfied or not, right? Very simply. So we use those metrics, but we also talk about durations for exactly the point that you're making, Anthony. In the beginning, some of those metrics may not look great. They may actually look really bad. So do we talk about how long does an experiment need to run before we're pretty sure it's not going to change? And so we talk about those time horizons, which are just as critical, so that you're not killing something too fast or that you're not sticking with something too long.
And you already mentioned AI, that you're doing some experiments with AI in the HR space and then across the whole organization. And of course, IBM has been a long time leader in this space. So what are some of the things that you're doing in the HR space?
So I think maybe one of the best examples, and it goes with a lot of what we were talking about at the beginning, is we do have an HR chatbot, a digital assistant that we call Ask HR. We've actually been on the journey with the chatbot for almost 5 years. So when we started the chatbot, it was an experiment. It was co-creating with employees and managers. Is there a digital assistant that would be easier to get answers to some of your questions? And we launched it. And I will admit, feedback was not great in the beginning. We had kind of dissatisfaction, a negative Net Promoter Score. And so we started talking about, okay, we would expect that maybe in the beginning. A digital assistant's a pretty big shift of human behavior to go from asking an HR professional a question to asking a chatbot a question. So we started again co-creating. Well, what would be better? What would be easier? Are there certain kind of questions a chatbot shouldn't answer that a human should? And as we went on that journey, we are now sitting here 5 years later, after multiple iterations, some fits and starts, some things that were said on the side, is we did 9 million interactions last year with the chatbot, managers and employees, sometimes even HR professionals. And it's not just knowledge recall anymore. We are finding that the chatbot's actually doing transactions. You can type in, I'd like to request a leave of absence. I'd like to request vacation. I'd like to transfer an employee. So it's becoming this digital assistant, but it has been a long journey that we're exactly on the points that we talked about. We co-created, we experimented, we revisited, we shut some things down, we tried some new things, and it's now led us to where we are today.
So of course, one of the big terrors is that AI is going to replace all humans, and we won't have anything to do. And you just said it's now done 9 million transactions last year, or interactions. So those are presumably things that humans would have done. So where is does there need to be a balance? How does it work? Has it just made other people more efficient that they can go do other things?
Okay, so Anthony, I could talk about this for a long time. Okay. I honestly get very frustrated with some of the narrative that's happening out there around AI. I get frustrated because I think all of the conversation is exactly what you just said. people are worried about, oh, are jobs going away? I think what you're going to find is that AI is going to replace very few jobs. It's going to be on the fringes. The bigger conversation we all need to be having is AI is going to change every job. It's going to change your job. It's going to change my job. Our jobs will still exist, but how we do them and what we do in those jobs is going to look different. And I worry that because we're getting distracted by a very small percentage of jobs that will completely go away, we're missing the much bigger thing that's about to hit us, which is how do we prepare the workforce for the changes that are coming? In the specific example that you talked about with our chatbot, what we found is our HR generalists that we recruited from great schools like South Carolina were spending 80% of their time doing transactional work, basic work. So this was causing some problems. We were making great investment in talent. They weren't really doing leadership coaching or performance management or workforce planning. They instead were getting forced to spend their time in transactions. But it also meant that our managers weren't getting the support that they needed. So for us, this wasn't about a net decrease or lost jobs. This was about taking that transactional work away so that the HR professionals could spend more time on things that are uniquely human.
So you see AI actually helping everybody do the things we're actually trying to train them to do already.
Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned we need to be thinking about how to train our workforce to incorporate AI, and how do we do that?
If I could go back in time, and I know the ship has already sailed, I would not call AI artificial intelligence. I would call it augmented intelligence. And I think that is what is playing
You're at
out
IBM.
now.
Can't you just change it?
No, I wish we could, believe me. But that's what I see playing out here. This is not about a total supplement or replace. So what we have to be working with our employees is thinking about how do they work with AI? What parts of their job are enhanced with AI? Are there the transactions that are going to happen? And then you sit on top of that and you do the more strategic work. Is it going to be decision support? And I did say decision support, not decision making. You know, if you're a manager and you get a salary budget that you have to distribute amongst your team, can AI do a first pass of it? It's still your decision, but could it speed the process up for you to say, hey, this is what we view based on skills and performance and potential. This is how we think you should allocate that budget. Rather than you spending maybe half an hour trying to allocate that budget yourself, it gives you a first pass that allows you to then just quickly tweak. I think that's what you're going to find that AI is doing more and more, is it's taking routine tasks away completely, but that it is also kind of working with you to help you get work done.
And so is one of those examples that it's often described from outside that IBM does a particularly good job of performance management and performance reviews. So is AI helping managers in those situations?
It's by helping them by surfacing data. So we have made a decision at IBM that AI will never be a decision maker. And we think that is extremely important. But one of the things managers often tell us is, when I have to think about performance management, giving performance feedback, there's lots of sources, there's lots of tools. I have to go into the learning plan, I have to go into project reviews. It's coming from a lot of different places. How can I see that all in one place? Or how do I know what's most important for this job or that job? What AI is doing, and specifically some of the automation, is giving managers one centralized view of everything we know about the employee or the employee has done in the last 6 months or last year, and surfacing it up to them so that they can see it, so that they can more quickly then work on, how do I give my feedback? And of course, because humans are important, what they're then doing is scheduling a call with their HR partner to say, let's role play how I give Anthony this feedback. So rather than spending time collecting the data, that's done for them. And they can then work on what really is going to make a difference of having a meaningful conversation.
So you you just said one of the things you've decided at IBM is that AI will never make decisions. That sounds like a principle of AI that you have been very thoughtful about creating. Are there others that you?
Yeah, so there's several that we've thought about, and IBM is really out there talking about these because we believe that the responsible use of AI is a true unlock for companies, not just in HR, but in a lot of places. But you have to do it well. So one is it's not a decision maker. The second place is it needs to be transparent. So if you're a manager who has your compensation recommendations being suggested to you, do you understand why? Can you click on each one, and will it explain why it's making the recommendation that it's making? So I think that's very important. So it must be transparent. It must be explainable. We also talk about the fact that it must be robust and scalable. AI only works if it is based on robust data sets, not using small, narrow data sets. So that's another principle of AI that we think is extremely important. And so those elements come together for us anytime we're going to use AI, but certainly with HR data, to make sure that we're doing it in an ethical way.
So the transparent and explainable one is a really interesting one because I think most of us don't have any idea what's going on inside whatever augmented intelligence there may be going on. How do we understand what's happening inside?
Absolutely. So I think this is what's really important for companies to do, and they can do it a couple ways. First of all, you need to publish for your employees. What data are you using? What data aren't you using? How are you using it? It's also important for the business process owners, let's say compensation professionals, to constantly be watching the model. Is it drifting at all? So this is an area when you think about building skills, compensation professionals, maybe they will no longer have to be skilled in how to enter a transaction in a tool, but they now need to be skilled in how to watch for model drift as they're observing the AI and the recommendations being made. So that is, again, one piece of their job, but it's a shift that's being made. And I think that's what's important as you think about implementing AI.
So besides the fact that people have misnamed it and people are talking about entirely the wrong topic, what worries you about it?
Okay, those two are pretty big ones.
Pretty big, there's no doubt.
I think it is the second one that worries me, which is, are we preparing our workforces? Are we thinking about it? And, not to get too academic here, but, people are talking about jobs, right? And the way I think about jobs, I think about all a job is it's a series of tasks that you perform, skills, you use skills to perform that drive outcomes. When people talk about jobs being eliminated, it's because they think the outcomes are going to get disrupted, that you'll no longer need those outcomes. And that's where I'm saying I think there are very few jobs that are made up with outcomes that can just be completely automated. I think outcomes in the long run in some industries could, but it's a much longer arc. This is Uber drivers and, digital technology. When the internet first came in, we weren't necessarily worried about digital commerce, right, and stores going away. It's a much longer arc to completely wipe out outcomes. What's happening in the middle of the jobs are the tasks you need to do are changing, and the skills you need to apply to those tasks are changing. And so I think companies actually have to dissect down to the job design level and start to say what tasks are getting disrupted that frees up time, so what additional tasks go in, what skills can now be done by AI, and so there are different skills you need to have in that job. These two places, I know this sounds very granular, but this is what every organization needs to be thinking about, so that you don't wake up a year from now, 2 years from now and say, oh my goodness, there's a bunch of tasks that have changed. I don't have the skills needed to apply those tasks. Or there's a bunch of tasks that have changed that have freed up time and I haven't redirected my workforce's time other places. So I think this is a massive issue.
So now completely changing focus on this one. It seems like organizational culture has become more and more important. So Do you agree that it is, first, kind of what's your definition of culture? And is it important to you and IBM and your board and otherwise?
Yeah. So we define culture. We say culture is a company's purpose plus their values plus the behaviors. And I think that all three of those pieces are really, really important. The purpose and the values, the purpose is, why do you exist as a company? How do you make money? You can't have a culture if you're not existing, right? The values are the enduring piece. And this is, I think, really important too, because culture isn't something that shifts overnight. But behaviors are how it shows up every single day. And I think that's also extremely important, because you can have purpose and you can have values, but if employees are acting differently every single day, your culture is going to be very different. So it's all three of those components. I do think culture is getting more and more important. In fact, I think it is the defining piece of an employee value proposition. And it is the differentiator. No two companies should be the same. I think what you're finding in a lot of other parts of the employee value proposition, they're starting to converge a little bit. But culture is the one piece that is kind of unique and distinct, and your company can own and attract talent in a really meaningful way. The last thing I guess I will say about culture, I get a little frustrated when people say, oh, the HR department owns culture. I'm very clear in our organization, everybody in the company owns culture. The unique role that I think that HR plays, though, is we are the custodians of culture, and we are often the ones that it's our responsibility to hold the mirror up to everybody else. And is this what we want to look like? Is this the culture we intend to be? But also to be upstanders when individuals or organizations or parts of the organization aren't living up to that culture. So we have a unique role.
One of the concerns we had when people started becoming more remote workers, that it would be harder to keep that culture strong, help everybody understand what the culture ought to be by mimicking others. Have you experienced that at all? Is it more challenging? Has it been a non-issue?
At IBM, we do believe that face-to-face interaction is important to kind of a vibrant experiencing our culture. Is it face-to-face interaction 5 days a week? No, but we do believe it's an important part of it. Are there virtual tools? Are there things you can do in remote environments to bring the culture to life? Absolutely. So I would never get lazy and say, oh, culture can only exist if you're face-to-face. Hybrid environments do work. But for our company, we believe that it is that hybrid piece that works. Some remote, some in person, that really makes the culture come to life.
So one of the critics of people like myself, they're like, oh no, we need to be in person more to keep that culture going, is the example at IBM often, that there's a strong IBM culture around the world, but we weren't in person with all of those people. So how do you create that in environments where people are not together all the time?
Yeah, look, flexibility is important, and having the shared values and behaviors. I think there's a lot you can do around training, even when you're hosting remote meetings, making sure that those behaviors, how you interact, is very similar to how you might do it face to face. So I think there's a lot you can underpin to make remote work. But I also think on the long term, 100% remote, 100% of the time, I don't know that works.
And another area that we, of course, are concerned about here at the Center for Executive Succession is the overall leadership team. So can you describe, is it actually a team? Is there such a thing as executive leadership team?
Yes.
And does it matter? And how do you make that stronger if it matters?
So absolutely it matters. And yes, it is a team. And if it's not a team, I think the business is in trouble. At that executive level, there are a couple things that I think are key to making it truly a team. One is trust. That executive team, maybe more so than any other team, sometimes has to make the tough calls. where there isn't a right answer or there isn't a win-win opportunity, where there are winners and losers. And so you have to have trust in that team to have the right conversations, to have the debate, to have conflict, but then to be able to make the decision and walk away. So I think that's really important. 2, alignment on the ultimate purpose is also, I think, really important for that team. You can disagree, you can even disagree on the specifics, but are we aligned towards the ultimate objective that we're trying to achieve? So I think that's also important. And then, look, I also think there's a third thing, which is around that team feeling empowered, that the decision maker doesn't always have to be the CEO. And I think some of the most effective ELTs that I've been part of, that I've heard about, are where sometimes the CEO lets someone else on the team make the call and then rallies and supports that person. And so I think those are 3 things that are pretty unique to a highly effective ELT.
So, Nickle, you asked me how long I should have this go, and I would do this all day. But I think I need to get you to our students.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for this.
No problem.
We really appreciate having you here on campus. Thank you.
Wonderful. Great to be here.
You just listened to another CHRO conversation. Today I spoke with Nickle LaMoreaux of IBM. She shared her views regarding how HR needs to be the driver of company culture and innovation. She also shared some thoughts on how data and AI can support continuous learning to help HR professionals support the talent that supports business. Nickle also highlighted that today is a golden day to be an HR professional. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.